Welcome, I'm Catherine Magana here with Steve Wolf, Rachel Ivanovich, and Greg Carroll. And we have been talking with clients about either phasing in retirement or in retirement. And over the years, we have seen things that have happened or we get asked questions. And then one of the questions that comes up all the time is, should I pay off my home? Or if we meet with them after they paid off their home, obviously we have those discussions as well. But the question is, should I pay off my home? And it's really case by case depending on how much you have left on your mortgage, what interest rate are you paying? Because at the end of the day, if you have a low interest rate, why would you pay off your mortgage? There's a few reasons why people want to do that. And one of the main reasons is for peace of mind. I think there's that kind of that idea, my house is paid off. And this conversation comes up all the time. And it's something we look at it from a planning perspective, a financial perspective. And once again, if you carry a low interest rate, you can potentially make more with your investable assets. Why would you do that?
Yeah, I think that, over the years being in this business, most people, one of their goals for retirement is to have that house paid off. That's the number one priority. And people used to buy a house and live in there 50 years and, die, and then the kids get it, right? But people move a lot more now, and especially with, the way, industries have changed and grown, and I mean, the influx to the Sun Belt, houses are flipping all the time. And, my wife is a perfect example. She's from a household of engineers, so they're very, everything's got to be laid out, structured, and we got to pay that mortgage off. And I'm like, our mortgage is so darn cheap, honey. I said, do not pay more than the mortgage payment. It was great, when we had 6%, but at 2.5%, there's no reason to do that. Because like you said, Catherine, your money can earn 5% in the money market today. Yeah. That's not forever, but right now, you're making more money with your cash.
Did your wife listen to her financial advisor?
She has. It took a little bit, because
smart move.
That mindset of I want to pay this off.
Want to pay it off, and and I had another client who had a windfall recently, and they wanted to pay off their mortgage. It's a husband and wife, no kids, nobody to leave the money to, and I'm like, why do you want to put all of your inheritance into the house? You should die owing the most money possible on that house. Because you're not giving it to anybody. So use the money for lifestyle change or something that you're going to enjoy more than just not having that mortgage payment.
And that obviously, depends on the situation. If you have no children, it's one thing. If you want to leave something to kids, but I agree with you. I mean, I think paying off a low interest mortgage financially doesn't make much sense. Because if you have a 2 or 3% mortgage, and a lot of people do right now because they refinanced over the last few years, and you can now get 5-6% in a bond, even in Treasury you can get that, which is very safe, hopefully. Why would you pay off a 2 or 3% mortgage? It doesn't make sense. So when people say, "Oh, but I just would feel better about," and I kind of look at them and say, "Well, would you feel better about having $100,000 or $300,000 in your savings account?" Right. And it doesn't seem to compute with most people because we've been trained. Pay off the house, pay off the mortgage, pay off the mortgage, pay off the mortgage. Well, if you have a 7 or 8 or 9 or 12% mortgage, yeah, that makes sense. But 2 or 3 or maybe even 4%, maybe not.
That's another reason to have a good financial person, a good tax person to help educate and explain the differences there. It's not, one size fits all. You don't need to pay off your house 100% of the time.
Well, yeah, and it can reduce your liquidity. I mean, you talk about that, Rachel, about clients who put money into their houses and they have no money to do anything else with.
I see it all the time where clients will come to me and say, "Oh, should I take money out of my 401k to pay off my house?" I'm like, "Please don't do that." And of course, they haven't consulted with a financial advisor yet about retirement, but they're, that's the kind of the baby boomers' rite of passage that so many, which was this common scenario where Americans would live in their house for 30 years and then they'd pay it off and go off into the sunset and retire and drive the RV around. But now when clients come to me and say, should I pay off my house? I'm going to lose my interest deduction. I just look at them and say, things have changed a lot and standard deductions are much higher than they used to be. And therefore, that's not the factor to consider. The factor to consider is if your house is paid off and you have no money in savings, what are you going to do if the roof needs to be replaced, or if you have a leak that the insurance company doesn't cover, you need to have that money available to cover major expenses. What about long-term care? If all your money's in your house and you have no money to live on, then you really need to be consulting with a financial planner.
Right, and then how much does it cost to borrow against that? It's actually one of the reasons I think that the reverse mortgage business kind of has flourished lately, because you can take money out without a payment. You still owe money because it's accruing, and your heirs will have less money, but you're getting some money out of your house. But it's about the only way you can do it without increasing your debt load. And that doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
I've had a lot of clients that have, doubled up on their mortgage payments. I mean, that was kind of their retirement plan, is I'll just pay off my house. And they've failed to do proper planning, or, they've consulted with their hairdresser or, a friend that said, oh yeah, you should pay off your house. So I think that all of you have said it, that people think that's the right move. That's that's my retirement plan. But as we've discussed on other podcasts, it's not producing income for you if it's your primary residence.
Right. And let me go back just a second. I want to be clear that I'm not saying a reverse mortgage isn't good. I'm just saying that, why should you be in that situation in the first place?
Right. That's kind of a emergency backup, contingency plan,
right.
Possibly. But
right. Should be something, if everything else is not there, well, there's money in the house. Now, if you're going to downsize at some point, okay, you have some appreciation. Hopefully, we don't have a 2008, 2009, 2007, whatever that was, where houses went down by 50%. And of course, that's the risk you're taking.
I've had that happen with clients. So I've had both scenarios. The scenario where the client had been in the house for 30 years, decided they wanted to downsize, all the kids had moved out, and then they were able to take, a portion of the cash from the sale of the first house, the primary. They were able to exclude most of it under Section 121, which allows you to exclude up to $250,000 per individual when you move out of your primary residence you've lived in for 2 out of 5 years. So they were able to do that, and then the remainder of the cash they were actually able to invest and live on that money. But then I've had other clients that have sold their homes, and then the market has tanked before they were able to buy the next house, and then they weren't even able to really get anything that was comparable, so they had to spend all of their cash to buy the next house, and then have no money to buy groceries or pay medical bills. And it's devastating to see that scenario.
I think the other aspect of this, and most people either don't understand it or just don't look at it, is that mortgages actually can act as an inflation hedge. And the reason for that is because as your monthly payment remains fixed, inflation erodes the real value of the debt. Okay, so as money gets more expensive, your debt gets cheaper. Okay, and it's not that the dollar amount gets cheaper, it's the purchasing power. Okay, think about, how much did it cost to buy a house 20 years ago, and then how much does it cost today? So just kind of do that in reverse. Mm-hmm. And that's what you're talking about. So sometimes paying off the house isn't the best financial decision. Now, I'll be honest with you. We talk to our clients, and we've told this scenario to many, many, many people. And I'm going to tell you that only a few listen to us, okay, for whatever the reason is. I mean, obviously, it's your home, it's your money. But it seems to me that I would rather have a higher net worth, if you will, and a higher cash flow than I would having a higher house value, okay? Because you're paying off that mortgage with inflated dollars. That is such an important concept that most people don't look at. And to Greg's point, many people are only in the house for 3 or 4 years. It doesn't make a difference, all right? But I can tell you that now that you have many people with 2, 3, maybe 4% mortgages, they're not selling so fast if they don't have to. Okay, so this argument makes even more sense, that pay off that mortgage with inflated dollars and let your money work for you.
It's interesting. We have a new client that we're working with, and they have a second home that they sold, and they were given this lump sum of money after they had their taxes, and they wanted to pay off their mortgage. And so they had this beautiful home. They have a lot of equity in their home, and they have a small mortgage with a low interest rate, and they wanted to pay that off. And we said, okay, well, let's look at overall, how does this impact? And the reality is they really needed to build up some of their retirement and savings and investable assets their real estate has done very well for them over the years, and they still have a lot of equity, but financially, it didn't really make sense for their particular case. And so it's just, once again, looking at the numbers and seeing the financial plan. Through the financial planning process, we're factoring everything in. We're looking at Social Security, rental income. We're looking at pensions. We're factoring your investable assets, your IRAs. And when you look at everything, then you look at, okay, how should my money be invested and positioned? And there's a lot of times, there's a lot more equity in the real estate. And obviously, being in California, we have a lot of appreciation here.
Well, I think there's appreciation everywhere.
That is true, everywhere, but California.
California is
Yeah.
A lot.
a lot.
Especially our area of San Diego.
So I think when you can put it in perspective and why you don't want to make some of those decisions, I think it's important. But at the end of the day, it's your money, it's your life, and we're here to guide you and make sure you're making those sound decisions. But I think when you start pointing out and sharing from a big picture and financial planning perspective, it's very impactful.
You've probably had these discussions too, not as much maybe lately, but with the houses. The houses are so expensive here. You could have bought it for $500,000. It might be $2.5–3 million now. Yeah. In 10, 15 years. I still get the question sometimes, or the response is, my house is my retirement. Yeah. Where are you going to live? Mm-hmm. What are you going to do if you tap into that house? You've got to downsize. Maybe it makes sense, like you were saying, Rachel, but you can't just say my house is my retirement plan. Mm-hmm. You need to save outside of that. So had a client recently, that was her response. I was like,
Well, it's interesting because I think that people's view of real estate is that it never goes down. Okay. Right. And part of the reason for that is because there's not, you aren't buying and selling your house every day, and what happens is most people probably stay in their house for more than 7-8 years. Okay. Maybe not much longer than 10 or 15, but they're in there for a long time. And so they've given it time to appreciate. I could say the same thing about the stock market. If you look at past history, obviously you can't say that that's always going to happen in the future, but the stock market over time has always gone up if you give it the time. So it's kind of a miscalculation, if you will, that it's the only thing that goes up. So instead of concentrating, it's like you just said, this is my retirement plan. All right. Well, what happens if that one asset goes down when you need it the most? That's not a good plan to have, I don't think.
No, because it's not liquid. So obviously, if you're forced to sell, or once again, we did bring up the reverse mortgages. That is, for some people, it makes sense, but there's a lot of things to consider: fees, timeline, amounts. I mean, but that is something in the back pocket that is available.
Right. And by the way, I'm not saying you shouldn't have a home. I would love having a home. Yes. Okay. But you should have the home because you enjoy being in your own home. Okay. I have said this to many people and they always look at me like I'm crazy. Your own home, if you live in it long enough, really isn't an investment. Once you take into consideration all that it costs you, from taxes to maintenance to whatever else it costs you to be in that house, you'll find in many cases, if you're there long enough, you haven't really made that much money. Matter of fact, I just moved from one house to another, and it had been 20-something years, 21 years. And when I factored all of the costs and this is just the cost of remodeling. Now I had to remodel a home. Okay, I came out about even, which means I really lost money because if you take into consideration the maintenance and the taxes and everything else, I really didn't make money on my house. Your own home is not an investment. I wish people would kind of understand that, even if it goes up in value.
It's hard when you see it appreciate and you have that equity. So that's
right. Your second house, your rental home, that's an investment. Okay, and that makes sense because you've got cash flow coming in and you have appreciation. And someone else is paying for all those maintenance costs and taxes. Mm-hmm. All right, so that's where the dichotomy comes in. All right, but in this particular case, at least, I think we're all in agreement, that in some cases it's fine to pay off your mortgage, and in other cases it's not.
Please stay tuned for important regulatory disclosures. The opinions expressed in this program are for general informational purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual or on any specific security. It is only intended to provide education about the financial industry. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult your financial advisor prior to investing. Any past performance discussed during this program is no guarantee of future results. Any indices referenced for comparison are unmanaged and cannot be invested into directly. As always, please remember investing involves risk and possible loss of principal capital. Please seek advice from a licensed professional. Wolf Weezy Magana, LLC, doing business as WWM Financial, Savvy Doc Financial Planners, and Savvy Woman Wealth Management, is a registered investment advisor with the SEC.